Order, order. Welcome to today's meeting of the Parliamentary Works Estimates Commission. We are here to consider the Parliamentary Works Grant main estimates for 2025-2026. I am Nusrat Ghani, the Chairman of Ways and Means. On my left I have Nick Smith. On my right I have Lord Macpherson and Lord Gardner. Could our witnesses please introduce themselves for the record? And I'll start on the left with you, Miss Simmonds.
Hello, Charlotte Simmonds. I'm the Managing Director of the R&R Client Team.
Hello, thanks very much. I'm Tom Goldsmith, Clerk of the House of Commons.
Simon Burton, Clerk of the Parliaments and the Lords, and with Tom we both serve on the Programme Board and the Client Board for R&R.
Hello, Russ, MacMillan. I'm Chief Executive of the Delivery Authority, been in post for 2.5 months now.
We've got quite a few questions to go through, so we're going to dive straight in. My first question is for Mr Goldsmith, or Mr Burton to follow up. Could you please provide us with an update on the progress of the Restoration Renewal programme over the last 12 months? Mr Goldsmith.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for all the work you do looking at this. It's very reassuring to know that these things are properly scrutinised. There's been quite a lot of work and progress over the last year. I think we last came to this committee about a year ago. The main focus of the work has been on continuing to develop the three options. In particular, the EMI option, you'll appreciate, was the least mature of the three options. It was the one which was somewhat late to the party. So there's lots of work that's been going on all three of those options, and we are confident that we will be able to give the governance committees all the information they need on track before the end of this year. Obviously, those committees, or boards rather, have changed somewhat given the election, but I'm pleased to say that, that we're up and running. Well, we have been up and running again for quite some time now. The programme board is particularly active, interested, quite an invigorating board to go along to because there are some really good questions and scrutiny of what's going on, so that's going well, I think. There's been lots of member engagement, led primarily by Charlotte's team since this time last year. Since the election, there have been 217 interactions with members of either house. That includes one-to-one meetings, committee meetings, people stopping at stalls in Portcullis House, for example, to talk about what's going on. That's about 150-something Commons members and about 60 if my maths works, yes, about 60 members of the House of Lords. So overall, going back a few years, we've now reached some more than 900 members, but there's been good engagement since the election. And of course, there have been some quite significant changes at the Delivery Authority that you'll probably want to ask Russ about later on, I expect.
Thank you. Just add one sentence. That's a very thorough analysis by Tom. The key thing we're all focusing on at the moment, we're all working on the Programme Board, the Client Board and the team, both in the Delivery Authority and the Client team, is getting those costed proposals published on time later this year for consideration, having been through the Programme Board and the Client Board, to be published for consideration in the two houses, and I'm sure we'll come back to that later in the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nick Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. Mr MacMillan, what are your initial impressions of the R&R programme, please?
Sure, so very good actually. I'm very impressed by the quality of the information that's now available to support the decision-making process. Very impressed by the skills and capability of the organisation. I think, as my colleague said, we're all very focused on the need for a set of costed proposals and then a decision this year. I think that's really important for the programme. And I think the other thing that I'm putting quite a lot of thought into at the moment is there's a very wide body of knowledge about what best practice looks like in major programmes, and we're doing an awful lot of work to think about how we would import as much of that as possible and to go through the mindset change that would be required as we kind of move from the development part of the programme into the delivery part of the programme, if that's what Parliament decides to do.
Is the programme where you would have expected it to be?
I think so. I think, clearly there's a lot of history on the programme. You'll know a lot about the reset that happened in 2022, but I think in terms of have we got the right pieces of information coming together to support decision makers, then absolutely yes. Do I think the information that we're putting forward is appropriately backed off and assured and tested, then yes. So I think all of the ingredients are there, and now we need to see what happens through the decision-making process.
Thank you.
We'll just make sure that the noise we're hearing isn't interfering with the broadcast. It isn't interfering with the... Wonderful. Mr. Goldsmith, you mentioned that there have been 900 members have been reached, 217 interactions, and you said that you are on track to present at the end of the year. Is that correct, Mr. Goldsmith?
Sorry, we're hoping to do everything we can to make sure that the houses, and before then the client board, and before that the programme board, has all the information to be able to take a decision by the end of the year. Of course, when the decision comes to the houses, is not in our gift, it's in the gift of the business managers. We hope that we will have given everything to the board so that the costed proposals can be published by the autumn.
And Mr. Burton, you said the costed proposals will be published by the end, but the question we all have, Mr. Goldsmith, is when will all three options be ready to be presented to Parliament? Are you saying that's down to the board, but you feel that you're on track that it could be presented to Parliament by the end of the year?
Yes, sorry.
Yes, no, sorry. We're
yes,
agreed on this.
Absolutely. We are working at the moment on a timetable towards publication by the autumn. The programme board, it still has, quite rightly, as you'd expect on a programme of this size, lots of questions, lots of things it wants to assure itself about. But we've had some good messages from programme board members recently that actually they think there is no really significant new information that they need. It's a matter of making sure that all the information we have is properly aligned and comparable across the three options.
If I may, that's, I think, a testament to the hard work of colleagues in the delivery authority, in strategic estates for EMI, and indeed for the client team. The fact that we've got so much information in a form that's ready to be pulled together to be presented, and it's that last step is the next couple of months' work, as Tom says, to make sure the options can be presented fairly, they can all be looked at together, but you, all of you, the members of both houses, have the information across a number of areas that you will need to take those decisions.
Mr. Burton, when Mr. Goldsmith says autumn, is he using autumn in the real world terms, or autumn as ministerials and civil servants use autumn?
Autumn goes on officially to December the 21st.
There we are. This is what we want clarity on.
I don't think it will be before November.
Okay.
But I'm hoping it would be in November.
So you've got confidence as of today, and appreciating all the risks involved, that all three options could be presented to Parliament by the end of the year?
Yes, certainly from our point of view, in terms of getting all the information and data together, the slight unknown is what the political bodies will do. As I say, we've been working very closely with the programme board. The client board will need to look at all this information. Some of it will be, lots of it will be new to it. So I can't say to you with absolute assuredness what the client board will make of it, but we're confident from an official side that we're on track for that programme, that timetable we set out.
As you already mentioned, you're not in complete control of the whole process. So can you explain to us what you put in place to manage those risks? And if the three options aren't presented to Parliament by the end of the year, what is your plan to?
I'll start, if I may. One of the things we have done over the last few months is to deepen the relationship between the workings of the two boards, the programme board and the client board, and there's more information flow in those spaces, particularly involving external members of both boards who are very, very active. The other thing, as Tom has said, the decision on when the decisions will come to the two houses is a matter for the business managers in the government. And I think I'm right that the leaders of both houses are on the client board, so they will be involved in those discussions at that level. But we are making sure at official level that officials within government have visibility of what they need when they need it, because the government's view on this will be very significant.
Lord MacPherson.
Yes. The government spending review is due to reach a conclusion later in the year. Have you had any discussions with the Treasury around how to fund the early years of phase 2? And if you have, what assumptions are you making?
Obviously, we're formally not part of the spending review in Parliament, but I take the point that that's the context in which this is all operating. We work with the Treasury at official level on an ongoing basis, and Charlotte's team does that. We haven't yet given them specific costs for 26-27 onwards. That's partly because we haven't yet given the programme board and the client board those finalised costs, but they are certainly aware of the sort of ballpark figures we're talking about, and that subject to the House's decisions, there could be a large increase in expenditure from 26-27 onwards if we do get to move into phase 2.
Thank you.
Lord Gardiner.
Thank you, and this is one I think for the clerks and Ms Simmonds. In 2022, the Client Board anticipated the right time to design longer-term governance arrangements for Phase 2 would be within the context of the strategic outline business case. So I wonder if you would tell us what you expect will need to change in the governance and accountability structures for Phase 2, how you think it would vary under the 3 options, and indeed in that relation, who is actually responsible for making these key decisions on governance and accountability arrangements for Phase 2? Who do you anticipate will deliver preferred option in Phase 2? And when do you envisage we can expect to see the consultation stage of R&R commencing?
Shall I make a start on that? The client team have done preliminary work to look at the governance and accountabilities in Phase 2 with a view to informing a reconvened independent advice and assurance panel, an expert panel that gave advice on the current governance arrangement. So we are reconvening that panel, and they will advise the client board on the governance for Phase 2. There are some provisions already within the Act, including the continuation of this commission, and so subject to there being no suggested changes towards the Act, they would continue. I think that in terms of lessons learnt around Phase 1, one of the benefits of the current governance is the closeness to members and being embedded in the parliamentary community, and that's something that we should take forward for consideration into Phase 2. And then in terms of the variation across all options are a major undertaking. They are a major programme of works, and they all have a very significant heavy engineering phase at the early stage. So in terms of what the governance and accountabilities will look like, they would look quite similar across the options at that stage. There may be a change towards the tail end of the longer options, but largely they'd be the same at the initial stages. I would say in terms of responsibilities for the decision making, the Independent Advice and Assurance Panel would advise the Client Board. If there are any significant changes to the legislation, that would be through primary legislation, so it would have to come back through the Houses for approval. But it would be the Client Board to consider what it wanted to take forward. I think you also asked who would deliver the preferred option as part of that. As I said, any of the options are a major undertaking, and the Houses would need additional capability to deliver them. So we're talking about quite large procurements, very significant supply chain management, and as I said, heavy engineering. So we would need additional capabilities, and really that's why the legislation established the delivery authority in the first place. So we assume that the delivery authority would be in place and providing those additional capabilities to Parliament. Did I miss any of your questions, Lord Gardiner?
Well, when do you envisage, I think on the basis of the assumption that the political direction and decisions are made, when would you envisage, particularly in mind this front end of a big engineering work, when actually would you envisage we could inspect on that basis of this construction stage beginning?
So when the works would start. So under the current plan, if we get a decision in 2025, moving into 26-27, we would undertake the procurement for the new supply chain. We would do the detailed design and we would start the planning process, so that into 28-29 we would start the construction works, so the enabling works including installation of temporary services, the installation of the river jetty, which you probably can't see the platform out of the window now, but those works are underway. The survey works are underway on the riverside, and the temporary accommodation works. So they would start in this Parliament. To be clear, what is unlikely to happen in this Parliament is any significant decant. That would be in a future Parliament. But we do expect those works to start in this Parliament from 27-28, and they would happen alongside the early works. So we've talked about the river jetty. We've also got Victoria Tower as early works, and Cloister Court, as well as a mechanical, electrical, public health and fire safety programme of works as well. So there will be a lot of construction activity.
Thank you. Anything from the clerks on that matter? Thank you very much.
You finished, Lord Gardner?
Yes, thank you.
Before I turn to you, Nick Smith, I've just been reflecting on the answers you gave to my earlier questions, Mr. Goldsmith and Mr. Burton. So I was trying to get my head around the process and who has responsibility where. Just so for clarity, once the costing proposals have been finalised and agreed by the client board, are you at liberty to publish this information to allow parliamentary debate on these before the options are scheduled by the government to be decided on by both houses? Mr. Goldsmith, shall I turn to you first?
They would certainly be published before the houses were asked to take a decision, because it will be those costed proposals that include all of the information that the houses would need.
Who decides on when they're published? Do you decide that, or is that taken by another part of this estate? I'm just trying to work it out.
It's a good question. The client board would have to agree the final report. Yes. Formally, whether it's then completely within our gift to give it to the houses, or whether we need a decision of the client board to say when we publish it, I'd need to check, and we can drop you a note on that.
I think a sort of correspondence would help.
Absolutely. Certainly I can confirm that it's the understanding of everyone involved that I've spoken to that the houses need those full costed proposals before they're asked to take a decision.
Yeah. You just want to know what that window is and who decides.
I understand the point.
Wonderful, thank you. Nick Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the clerks, I think. Is the Phase 1 estimate limit of 475 million that's been set by the House Commissions the upper and final limit? And what steps are you taking to prevent Phase 1 expenditure continuing beyond 25-26, please?
So obviously it would be up to the commissions to decide if they wanted to decide for whatever reason to extend the Phase 1 expenditure limit. But the timetable we've set out, which we've been talking about, means that as soon as we get a decision from the houses, we move into Phase 2. So if we meet the timetable that we've been talking about, there's no need for any more Phase 1 expenditure. If there is some delay, if we don't get decisions along the timescale we're talking about, then I suppose it's possible that we would then be looking at an extended Phase 1, and the commissions would need to reflect on that. But as I say, if things go to plan, there won't be any need for that. Is that right? Sure. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Lord Gardner.
Thank you. Perhaps I could turn to the comparability and scrutiny of the options. I think these are mainly for Ms Simmonds, but when will the design of the EMI option be complete? And will this allow sufficient time for comprehensive scrutiny prior to any debate? And particularly mindful that this was the late arrival in the options. I just wondered if you could explain that before I move on to another area of this.
Of course. So the enhanced maintenance and improvement option was requested to be worked up in March 2024 as part of the strategic case. Strategic Estates, the in-house team, are working that up, and they have made really good progress. So they've already worked through the feasibility stage, and they have provided estimates of costs, schedule, scope, risks and other information. They have been speeded along through being benefited by the DA sharing their design information, which has helped immensely, and obviously the EMI team will then adapt that information around the specifics of the construction approach of a rolling programme. Tom and Simon alluded to it, but the programme board last week confirmed that they have sufficient information at this stage to undertake a thorough assessment of all three options and provide their advice to the client board. So we are in a really good place. That has required in the last few months a number of alignment and challenge sessions between the options, which has allowed information to be shared across all of the options and to take on the good ideas and opportunities from both. So the EMA option will continue to be developed over this year, but the board is happy that it has sufficient information for comparison of the three options and sufficient to provide their advice to the client board. I should add, though, at the end of this year, all three options will be at concept design stage, and that is commensurate with the stage we're at of the programme and the decision making that we're expecting of the houses. After that decision, as I said earlier, we will move into detailed design. So they will all be at concept design stage at the end of this year.
Thank you. And running on from that, would I be right in saying that you would say that EMI, the third option, would have the same level of maturity by the time you have gone through the process you've described? Because obviously I think it's essential that all three options are comparable so that the decision can be made on as much of a level playing field for all three options. And I think I'm conscious obviously about the level of maturity when we're about to make some very consequential decisions. So I wondered if I could tease out a bit more on that element of maturity and comparability.
So it's true to say that they are at different levels of maturity at this stage. They are all being assessed against the same criteria. The enhanced maintenance improvement will still be somewhat behind the delivery authority options, and maybe Russ can clarify on that, but they will be sufficient to provide comparison at the end of this year, and the boards are happy that they have sufficient information now to provide their advice. When
I think this is important, so when you say it will not be mature, in what areas do you think, compared with the other two, there will be this lack of maturity, and how you would therefore decide, if it's less mature, how sound it would be to make decisions thereon?
So some of the areas that we are still working on with enhanced maintenance improvement is understanding the decant strategy, which again the delivery authority are helping with. So we understand from enhanced maintenance improvement what the demand would be, and we're working through with house teams about where those decanted areas would go. In terms of how we manage that and make sure that we have a fair comparison of the options is making sure that enhanced maintenance and improvement has sufficient risk and contingency and optimism bias within its cost and schedule ranges that would allow for that comparison. But Russ, do you want to come in?
I mean, I think that's quite a comprehensive answer. I think in reality, a lot of what EMI is working on came from the original DA options. So from an engineering perspective, there's certainly some changes on some aspects of the design, but quite significant bits of the design have been moved across. So I think you can take an awful lot of confidence in that. And then, as Charlotte mentioned, we've just completed a very specific alignment exercise where we've been through each other's work, we've assured each other's work, we've understood where there's differences, we've confirmed whether those differences are justifiable by the different concepts involved, and where they haven't been justifiable by the different concepts involved, we've effectively aligned each other so that, to your question, we're very comparable, that once you put the risk adjustments in that Charlotte talked about, you can genuinely be looking at these options from a level playing field perspective.
Thank you. And really to the clerks, in terms of the independent assurance, and we heard a little earlier about some of that earlier work, but in terms of work being carried out against the three options in terms of independent assurance, and the question, of course, whether these reports would be made public as part of the consideration prior to any debate.
I'll try this one. We've been following industry best practice and guidance from what is now called the National Industry Service Transformation Authority, previously the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. We followed their guidance on what independent assurance looks like, in addition to our own assurance within the various delivery teams. So, for example, we've had independent scrutiny of the three options from Grant Thornton, and they have experience of construction, major projects, programmes and delivery and business cases. But the DA also has independent expert panels providing advice and challenge on their options. Strategic Estates has been using what they call red teams, which is independent people to challenge and provide assurance on the EMI option. And we've had a separate health and safety and fire assurance panel that's looked at the three options from a safety perspective. The clerks, the two of us, have commissioned further independent advice and assurance from the panel, which will report before the summer, and that will feed into the costed proposals. Whether we publish any of these things, Charlotte, would you be able to help us on that?
So the independent advice and assurance panel report will be published. There is a commitment to publish that, and that is the overarching assurance of the whole programme, and that will be published.
And thinking about assurance, and particularly with a building which does unfortunately have a lot of asbestos, that is quite a specialist area, I would have thought, and again perhaps confirmation from the clerks that this is very much an element of that independence assurance for the options.
Yes, absolutely. Simon just referenced the independent review on health and safety aspects of this work, which we were very keen to commission. And that really was looking at two questions. The first was, do we really need a programme on the scale of R&R from a health and safety perspective? And the answer was clearly yes. And the second question was, can each of the three options be delivered safely? And the headline conclusion was that they all could in principle, but they carry different risks. But as part of that exercise, we had three external experts undertake this piece of work, and asbestos was absolutely forefront in their minds as one of the key risks that would need to be managed.
I'm interested in the word in principle. Obviously that's further down the line, but it's a key point, isn't it? Thank you very much.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Ms Simmonds, Mr Goldsmith talked about 217 interactions with MPs and peers, and
217.
17.
Yeah,
sorry, 217. Thank you. So 150 MPs, maybe, and nearly 70 peers. That's good going. But of course, there was much change in the 2024 election, and new peers come forward reasonably regularly. You've also talked about the half dozen channels you've used or opportunities you've used to get members' interest. But given we've got a hard deadline of next autumn for these important votes, what else are you able to do to increase take-up and interest in your important work?
Of course, so in terms of the channels, our normal channels are one-to-one briefings. We have an R&R tour of the palace. We present to committees, and we try to have a regular rotation of quite visible engagement activity across both houses. So normally for the Commons in Portcullis House, but in the Royal Gallery for the Lords. They would be our stock offering. In terms of the tours of the current membership, we've had 193 members of either houses have done the tour. That's 93 MPs and 100 peers, and so we will continue to progress that. In terms of we've had a real focus since the general election, and as you say, we have new members of the House of Commons, but also new members of the House of Lords. General election means there's a lot of people at one go. They are trying to get used to the actual building in the first space. But something has been really successful is getting the new Programme Board Chair, Judith Cummings, so Deputy Speaker in the House of Commons, and Lord Vaux as the Deputy Chair, to email all members directly and encourage uptake of engagement. And that has been really effective, and we'll continue to use opportunities to make sure we've got member-on-member communications to try and increase uptake. We are very conscious of engagement fatigue. This programme has been going on for quite a long time, and we know we really want to ramp up engagement when we get to the publication of the costed proposals. So we will look to use our tried and tested methods that I've just talked you through. We will also look to provide exhibitions that will provide more information about the options. We will try to use innovative methods to bring to life some of the elements such as disruption, and as I say, we will try and use our board members to engage with members as well. I should add we are also very keen to engage with staff, both administration staff and member staff, and the uptake of that has also been really good. So we've briefed over 1,200 staff and taken over 700 staff on tours, so that's member staff and house staff, and we will continue to provide that offer as well because it's very important that they are also engaged and part of this process.
What tools are you using to manage the effectiveness of your contact with people?
So in terms of the effectiveness, we try and make sure we have a spread of engagement across both houses, across parties and other attributes, including length of service. We always seek feedback in terms of our formal engagement, both through the tours and the briefings. Broadly, that is positive. And we continue to ask members when we have the opportunity about how positive they are that we'll get a decision. So we continue to track those metrics, but as I say to the board, to the District Commission, if you have any views on how we should improve engagement, then we are all ears, because we want to make sure that we, as I say, really do ramp up for the costed proposals report and make sure members are aware and informed to make the decision.
Have you thought about going back to the people who've already shown interest, given they've indicated willingness and have been on tours and so on?
We are relentless, so if you've showed any engagement in the first place, we will be knocking on your door, absolutely.
Mr. Simmonds, just for the record, you said this programme's been going on for quite some time. How long has it been going on for?
So the Joint Committee on the Palace of Westminster reported in 2016.
There we are. And Mr. Burton, can I follow up on an answer you gave to Lord Gardner earlier on independent insurance? Can I ask why you are not planning to publish the assurance reports you have commissioned in their entirety?
We are publishing the ones that we are confident we can publish. The health and safety and fire report that was commissioned was shared with the client board, but even in that circulation it did have in it a number of security references to security, and I think I can say this on the record that we are very conscious in security. We take advice from Alison Giles and her team, of course, on security, that if you publish what may appear to be 5 or 6 innocent bits of information, a bad actor might put them together and be able to draw conclusions. So we're always very, very careful when we've had a review of that kind not to publish anything that would cause difficulties on the security front. Is there anything you want to add to that, Tom? I don't think that's a fair answer.
Thank you so much. Lord Macpherson.
Can I turn to the estimate for the coming year? I'm intrigued. Well, first, I'm impressed that that the overall cost assessments come down from 515 to 475 million, and I'm intrigued by the number of 475 because I think that was the original voted expenditure limit. I mean, you've provided lots of bottom-up reasons why the answer is 53 million for the coming year. Was there any top-down consideration in arriving at that number which delivers this nice round number of 475 million for phase 1?
So that particular judgment predates me, but Charlotte, jump in if you can help on that. I think in reality that was a coincidence. The 53 million was a genuine bottom-up exercise that sought to strike the right balance between maintaining momentum on the programme and avoiding losing the capability that we spent a long time building up, but at the same time recognising that we wanted to minimise expenditure before Parliament makes a firm decision to move into phase 2. And as you rightly say, it represents a 35% reduction on what we spent last year.
Interesting. I recognise with a programme like this, there are quite considerable fixed costs just in keeping the show on the road. And I note that in 25-26, the delivery authority's corporate functions make up 27% of the total budget request, compared to an average of 16% over the course of phase 1. Can you explain the challenges the delivery authority has faced when trying to consolidate this expenditure on corporate functions further?
Sure. I think the first point is that our corporate costs have reduced year on year. We're always looking for efficiencies. We're 4 million down in this budget than we were in the last budget. I think in terms of the percentage calculation that you've put forward, I mean, part of the reason that the percentage has gone up is that some of our project work has drawn to a close, now waiting costed proposals and the decision-making part of the programme, and so it's only natural that the overhead part of the programme goes up in its size. In terms of what comprises within those, within that 27%, I think it's worth saying that a significant proportion of that cost relates to our commercial activity and getting ready for, so around about half of the cost, in fact, relates to our commercial teams getting ready for a major procurement exercise, which is the first thing that we would do if Parliament decided to proceed into phase 2. And another significant part of that cost is in relation to the rent, effectively, that we pay Parliament for use of part of the parliamentary estate. That's another couple of million. With what's left, though, we have done quite a lot of work to bear down on those costs and deliver some quite significant efficiencies within that.
And can you explain why surveys are continuing into 25-26 when designs have now been completed? And can you confirm that these surveys will be of use regardless of which option is selected?
So I think the first thing to say is that designs have been completed to a certain level of maturity, and this really takes us back to Charlotte's answer earlier. We've reached a relatively early concept phase of design. I think all of the learning from major programmes tells you that you can never know enough about the building or the project that you're working on, and so there will undoubtedly be a continuing need for surveys as the programme progresses, and that's a very significant part of our risk mitigation strategy. In terms of the surveys that we've chosen to do pre-decision and post-decision, we've tried to make a pragmatic decision about those which are the really critical ones to get a kind of rough cost and schedule envelope available to decision makers. Clearly, once decision makers decide exactly which option they want to go with, then you would look, particularly our new partners, would look to do quite a lot of additional survey work. And in terms of your other question about will the results of those surveys be of use to all options, then yes is the simple answer to that.
Just to be clear, once a decision has been made on which option to pursue, there will inevitably be more surveys in relation to that particular project. But in determining when the surveys take place, you're focusing on ones which are of general use for the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, for example, the big priority this year is the river and the river terrace, because common and early to all of the programmes is the need for a river jetty and a logistics capability.
Good. Just coming back to strategic estates as they develop the EMI option, I mean, are your resources being made available to strategic estates?
Absolutely. So we're working very collaboratively together. I think I talked a little bit earlier about the alignment work that we've done. And actually, that's as of much benefit to us as it is in the other direction, in that it's actually a really good way of us assuring our own work, looking at new ideas, thinking about how we could do things differently. And so there's a very collaborative and two-way process between the two teams to make sure that we can each put the best proposition forward that we can manage.
Presumably at the margin there must be some debate about whose budget the particular activity is scored against between the delivery authority and strategic estates.
It's not a debate that I've particularly come across. I mean, I think in many senses it's a relatively straightforward attribution of the DA costs through the grant that we're talking about today and strategic estates through the normal in-house budgeting process.
Thank you.
Lord Gardner.
Thank you very much. In 2023-24, there was a significant write-off of almost £700,000 of survey equipment that was no longer needed. There was this large purchase in 22-23 at a comparatively early stage of the programme. So I wondered what the explanation to that was as to why was that large purchase made in 1 year and then written off the next, and indeed whether there's been any progress with if that particular equipment is no longer what is required as to the disposing of it.
So a decision was made in early 2022 to procure some equipment to monitor effectively ground movement, and that's the £700,000 piece of equipment that you refer to. That was a rational thing to do at the time based on the programme that we understood. But as you're aware, the programme then went through a big reset in 2022 that effectively moved the starter main works backwards. And the particular output of this survey has a validity period associated with it. And so it wouldn't have then, at the point the programme be reset and moved the main work backwards, been rational to continue with that survey. And so we ended up with a piece of survey equipment on our hands that we no longer needed against the new reset programme. We have disposed of that equipment. We managed to resell it. In doing that, we made the loss that we're talking about today. So we resold it for £50,000, and that generates the loss that we've talked about. The predominant reason for the drop in value of the equipment is the fact that it moved outside of warranty and therefore has a relatively limited second-hand resale value, resulting in the write-off. Clearly, with the benefit of hindsight, knowing the programme we know now, we wouldn't have purchased the equipment when we purchased it. But prior to the programme reset, I think it was a rational thing to do.
There's obviously a background to this, but in terms of needing information on movement and so forth, I'm not quite sure why the reset, you'd want that information at some point about presumably the conditions of the land and so forth. So I'm not quite sure why the reset meant that, in effect, this survey equipment was, or the result of that survey work wasn't of any benefit or whatever. I'm somewhat troubled, obviously, that £700,000 and now it's been sold for 50, and what is more, the equipment doesn't appear from your description to have been particularly valuable overall because of the reset. I'm somewhat confused as to why the reset would mean that £700,000 worth of survey equipment, when we'd place great store on surveys to provide us with a lot of information, and the palace being very well surveyed, I'm still not quite understanding why this we were in the position of spending this sum of money and then it was no longer needed.
So if you'd like more detail on the specific technical aspects of the survey, we can certainly write and follow up on that. My broad understanding is that you instrument up the building and you monitor the way in which the ground moves over time, and the results of such an experiment have a relatively time-limited utility. And so at the point the programme was reset and the start of the programme moved backwards, there was no longer any basis on which we should be doing that survey work in 2022. And it's at that point we decided that we should move ahead and sell the equipment. But certainly in terms of the technical aspects of the survey, I'd be very happy to follow up with more detail on that.
Well, obviously we're talking, as I read it, of a year. It was purchased in 22-23. It was written off in 23-24. It's a very short warranty. Why not lease it? I sort of think if there are lessons learned from this, if there is this sort of equipment, and I'm pretty surprised that it has such a short warranty for it to be out of warranty when it was sold, why wouldn't we be thinking of leasing equipment like this?
So that's certainly something that we're looking at in the future. At the time the judgment was made to procure the equipment, it was a more cost-effective solution to purchase it than it was to lease it. That was obviously based on the certainty of the programme we had at the time. I think we would all recognise now that we have to recognise that the programme is going to evolve and change, and one way of dealing with those uncertainties, absolutely, as you say, is to lease, and certainly that's something that will be front of mind when we look at these types of purchases or procurements in the future.
Thank you. I still think it's an example of some lessons learned. If we have equipment that is of such a short lifespan, it'd be quite interesting to know what it would have been if we had leased it. I find it difficult to believe it would have been involving £650,000, but there we are. Thank you.
We're going to continue on the value for money theme. Mr MacMillan, I think you can see by all of our reactions that we are very disturbed by the transaction that led to a £650,000 loss, and you kept prefacing that by it was a rational or a sensible thing to acquire in the first place. And that is troubling us, because this is a standalone item for a standalone job. If those decisions can't be made in a healthy fashion, it throws into doubt the complexity of the overall project. It's remarkable that we're using the language lessons learned. And I was just leaning into Lord Macpherson. I'm not sure there would be such subtle language if this was a corporate environment, to not be able to procure a piece of equipment that was going to be out of date or not be useful for the project, or then not to sell it within the warranty is quite difficult.
So I agree. I think with the benefit of hindsight, we would have made different decisions. We absolutely will look to lease equipment where it's appropriate to do so in the future, and we will absolutely think very carefully about these types of decisions as we move forward.
Going on to bigger sums now, has £475 million, Mr MacMillan, has £475 million represented value for money for the taxpayer?
So the £475 million that the programme has spent has generated a lot of value for the programme, predominantly in terms of the designs and the schemes that we now have available for decision makers to make a decision around. As we've touched on quite a lot, we've done an extensive programme of surveying work which has significantly improved our understanding of the palace. That's obviously a very significant de-risking activity as we look ahead to the programme and how we deliver it. We've done a significant amount of work around temporary accommodation, in particular the delivery authority that's around the Queen Elizabeth II conference centre, and we're obviously very focused on getting ready for the major procurements that we're going to run next year. So we've always, I think, been very focused on value for money. I think knowing what we now know about the way in which the programme has evolved, we might have made different decisions at the time we made the decisions, but looking back, I think the decisions that were made at the time prior to the programme reset were sensible and rational, and the programme has continued to progress irrespective of that reset.
You're confident that it represents value for money, but you then mentioned issues around hindsight. What could have you've done, or would you have wanted to do differently if you had the benefit of hindsight?
So I think if we knew how the programme had developed, you may have slowed down the rate at which the delivery authority scaled itself in preparation for the programme. I think one of the things that we did through the organisational review was take a step back and look at the functions that we really needed to procure within a standalone delivery organisation, and those things which we could rely on others for. So I think there's a couple of lessons that we've learned, but predominantly those lessons were then acted upon through the organisational review, which, as we heard earlier on, generated savings of 35% as we move into this year.
Anything else you want to put on the record that, with hindsight, you may have done differently?
Don't think so, thank you, unless colleagues want to add.
Okay. Thank you. The addition of a third option has extended phase one. To what extent, if any, has this caused extra expenditure for the DA, and can you value this cost of the delay?
So I think in terms of the effect that the reset had on the delivery authority's activity, it was more about the reset itself and the time effect of the reset as opposed to the injection of a third option per se. And I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that the reset was done for all of the right reasons, because the programme needed to take a step back and realign itself with customer expectations. So whilst on the one hand the reset has generated more cost into phase one, that was with the net benefit of revisiting the programme overall and focusing on getting that to the best place possible, aligned with what our customers want. I think the honest answer is it's very difficult to be precise about how you would value that delay. What I can say is that prior to the programme reset, the DA was predicting that the phase one aspect of the programme would cost 350 million. Obviously, sat here today, we're predicting it costs 475 million. There's not a clear logical link between those two things, but it gives you some sort of sense of the size and the scale of how the programme's evolved, I think, over time.
Thank you. Nick Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at this issue of surveys and cost and value. And now I understand that actually there's a relatively small amount of money that's been spent on surveys. And does that mean they haven't been given enough importance? I mean, looking at one of the diagrams here, we spent 50 million, about 11% of the overall cost on surveys. Have we got that right, do you think, Mr.
So I think it's back to my earlier comment that we've tried to make a pragmatic decision about what it's rational to do pre a parliamentary decision to move into phase two and what it would be rational to wait. I think there is a lot more surveying that we would like to do, but I think that sits better once Parliament's decided exactly which option it wants to proceed with, and would be a part of the discovery exercise that we would do once we have our new delivery partners on board through the procurement process that I talked about earlier. So absolutely we have an aspiration to do a lot more surveying. That's just not necessarily the type of work that would be appropriate this side of a parliamentary decision.
Okay. Over £100 million has been spent on data and digital during phase one. Do you think the data and digital infrastructure could be utilised regardless of the option that's selected? Did the DA pitch its data and digital strategy, do you think, at the right level?
So we recognise that data and digital costs have been high. We've done a lot of work to reduce spend in that area, and we've reduced spend by 2/3 in the last 4 years. Some of those costs were set-up-related costs that wouldn't then recur. But in terms of what we've done with the spend, effectively we've brought to bear industry best practice systems, including, for example, a building information model, which would be of use to any of the options on the table. And we've tended to use standard off-the-shelf products that any new set of contractors coming in would be able to take and use and gain value from.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to touch on the role of accounting officers. Mr. Goldsmith and Mr. Burton, you're both accounting officers. Just for the record, is that when we say the word accounting officers, that's the same as it is in the outside world? So you carry the same responsibilities and the same liabilities as well?
Yes. Yes, in terms of a
just
permanent secretary, for example, in a government department.
Things are very different in this place. I want to make sure that everybody understood that you have the same responsibilities and the same burdens. You are both responsible for ensuring that funds allocated to the programme are used efficiently and effectively. What are your personal reflections on the £500 million that will have been spent on the programme during phase 1? I'll go to Mr Burton first.
Thank you. Well, as Russ has already said, a lot of good work has been done to set things up, to do the surveys, to build the building information model. There's a lot of work being done on temporary accommodation, particularly for the Lords. The work on QE2 is very well advanced to such an extent that our Commission has been able to look at quite detailed proposals for what we will do with QE2 if we end up there. And of course there's been a lot of work on procurement, and don't forget that the initial costs of setting up the delivery authority was where quite a lot of the money went. But as I think it might have been you, Russ, who said to me the other day, one of the lessons learned from big infrastructure projects generally is that actually money spent early, if it's spent well, as I think it has been, can deliver benefits. If you try and pare costs too much in the very, very early stages, you regret it later on. So I am confident that the money has represented value for money to date. It's got us to where we are, and if that allows the houses to take these decisions this year, that it'll be money well spent.
Not if you spend money too early on a £700,000 piece of equipment that can't be used.
That was a particular case which I think Russ has given an answer to. Obviously, as Russ said, things could have been done differently, but that was a particular issue and a particular problem that we accept and recognise.
Mr Goldsmith?
I agree with everything that Simmonds just said. I take assurance from the fact as well that there's been quite a lot of scrutiny of the budget, not just by us but by others, including this committee, and that, for example, the Treasury has consistently described the budgets as taut and realistic. There are lessons to be learned. Russ talked about the timescale in which the DA was scaled up, and on a more operational level, you quite rightly asked about the write-off for that piece of equipment. One thing I'd reflect about on that, those questions are entirely valid, and in your situation I would be asking exactly the same questions, but you referred, Chair, to how would that look in the corporate world or the commercial world, and that's a very fair question. I think those costs we incurred were particularly driven by a political reset, and this is an unusual environment in which decisions don't always stick in quite the way they do in other places. I think the reset was the right thing to do, but I just make that point that has an impact on how we work, and that putting aside the politics but just reflecting the fact that this is a working legislature, there are costs associated with that in terms of when you can do work that you'll understand.
Absolutely. I think this is a peculiar working environment where decisions are taken in one place but they can be challenged again in another place politically. And now, what would you consider changing for phase 2 of the programme to ensure value for money is maximised? And I'll come to you, Mr Burton, first.
Phase 2, I think largely it will depend on which option is chosen, because it'll be a very different world depending on which option is chosen. So I would say the first thing to do is to understand where we're going to go. One of the biggest questions I think around that would be who's actually going to do the work in phase 2, because the delivery authority has been busy preparing to do the work for options 1 and 2. Strategic Estates has been preparing option 3, but who and what skills and what size of organisation, what cost of organisation we will need to actually do the work will depend on which option is chosen. And I think that will be the biggest decision that we will need to take quickly to make sure that the delivery mechanism is the right one for the option and its value for money. I would say that would be my top priority.
Mr Goldsmith?
I don't think I have anything to add to that, thank you.
Under a continued presence or EMI option, how would you balance the potentially conflicting responsibilities of maintaining health and safety standards with the need to deliver the R&R efficiently? And I'll come to you, Mr Goldsmith, first this time.
Thank you. Health and safety will remain our top priority. It's the non-negotiable bit of all of this. We've said in the past, and my predecessor has also said in the past, that we could not support an option which carried an extraordinary level of unmitigated risk. Any work of the size we're contemplating carries health and safety risks. It's why we were particularly keen at this stage to get that independent assurance piece of work done by some experts. As I mentioned, that has said that in principle all three options could be delivered safely, but it flags up that there are real risks to be managed, and it says that if you were looking at this only from a health and safety perspective, that the full decant would be the safest option. Clearly there are all sorts of factors to weigh up, but that is the judgment that those experts came to. So if we go for any of the options, at the top of our list of questions to ask for those responsible for delivering it will be, how will you keep the place safe? How will you keep our people safe when you deliver this programme? And that's something where I'm sure we will continue to need external assurance on. It remains a top priority.
Mr. Burton, are you also in the view that the full decant is the safest option?
Instinctively, that feels the case because everybody will be away, apart from the people who are actually doing the work. So safety is something that will be one of the top factors that will be presented, compared in the costed proposals. There will be others: cost, time, disruption to parliamentary business, outcome. They will all have to be weighed, but safety will be absolutely fairly and impartially assessed for each of the three options, and the weighting and how it comes out will be for the costed proposals to say, but you will get that information.
And final question from me. If disruption becomes greater than originally perceived, what will be prioritised? Mrs. Goldsmith and Mr. Burton, just pretend it's just us in the room. What will we prioritise? The business of the House or the progress of the programme? Let's be honest now. Mr. Goldsmith, you're first.
We're here to, safety will always be the absolutely top priority, but we're here to facilitate a parliament. And so, of course, it depends on the exact scenario, and it's quite difficult to talk in the abstract because, in reality, we'd be weighing up lots of different factors. But if disruption was such that people couldn't bear it, I'd say, I hope we wouldn't get to that situation, because one of the things we're trying to weigh up now, the programme board is trying to weigh up and the client board will try to weigh up, is can these options be delivered with a level of disruption that we can live with? If we get to the point where that's not the case, I think it really depends on the exact circumstance, what the cost would be of stopping work and pausing it against the parliamentary activity that has to carry on. But to give you an example of where I'm coming from, one of the priorities I said to the whole organisation when I became clerk is that we need a sharper focus on making sure everything we do here is about supporting the chamber, committees and members. That's why we're all here ultimately. And I'm in this job, and I've been working here for 28 years because I want to support Parliament and make sure it can function. If it can't function because of levels of disruption, then we need to look at that and do something about it.
Diplomatic, but I'm seeing business of the House there as a priority. And Mr. Burton, yourself?
I think it's important, as I said to the Public Accounts Committee when we first went there, we wear a number of hats. We're both accounting officers, as you've said. We're both chief procedural advisors to our House, supporting the business of our houses and our members. We're also corporate officers with statutory duties for health and safety, and it's in that capacity that the statutory duty to get R&R done has been added to our jobs. The reset that was talked about prior to that, the delivery authority and the sponsor body had the statutory duty to get this done. That's now on our shoulders. So as corporate officers, we have both a health and safety responsibility and a responsibility to deliver this. There is a subtle difference between Tom and myself in that in the Commons, colleagues are employed by the Commission, whereas in the Lords, people are employed by me. So I am the employer. So as corporate officer, I have a particular personal responsibility to all my colleagues. So these things are constantly in tension in our heads, and we're balancing them all up. And I think, as Tom says, it would very much depend on the circumstances. But certainly, I can't speak for the Commons, but in our House, there are many, many members who absolutely prioritise health and safety. Many members of the House of Lords have worked in industry or trade unions or universities or schools or construction, and they have health and safety in their DNA, and they want the place to be safe, obviously for themselves, but also more importantly for the staff and for the people who come. So I think the safety consciousness is not just in our minds, it's broader in the parliamentary community.
Could I just add on one small point to my earlier answer? I agree absolutely with everything Simon just said. When we run projects and programmes here at the moment, which are obviously not at the same scale that R&R will be, but which are pretty significant, they will routinely have budgeted within them some budget for risk and contingency. Yes. And that will partly be about, for example, if the house one of the houses might be, or both the houses might be recalled, which could disrupt a programme of work, or that for other reasons to do with parliamentary business, works might need to be paused or done in a different way. So on a smaller scale, we are used to managing that already, and I'm sure Charlotte or Russ could say more about this. So the detailed budgets for R&R will have an element of that within them.
Well, Gordon, you've got a supplementary?
Well, just thinking about this dilemma, am I right in recalling that in Canada there was a desire to remain within the Parliament, and then somewhere down the line it became apparent, and I'm not sure whether it was disruption and safety concerns, but in the contingencies, obviously, particularly looking at the two clerks, I think the experience of Canada, obviously I'm sure you have very much in the thought process because of obviously the contingency of their experience.
Sorry, Simon. Yeah, absolutely.
Have you done some comparative study of different parliaments?
So we are part of the International Network of Parliamentary Properties, so that's largely made up of parliaments who are undertaking refurbishment works. Canada is obviously one of the main players and is very well progressing their programme. And in terms of their building, they have the centre block, which housed the chambers, and they had two separate buildings to the side. I'm sorry, I can't remember Canada what they're called. And the Commons moved to one side, and the Lords intended to move to the other. And in the eventuality, the Lords actually moved, or the Lords equivalent moved further down the road to a different facility, I believe because of the disruption, but we can provide a note. We have extensive engagement, and the Delivery Authority do, with our Canadian counterparts, so we can provide information on that if it's helpful.
That would be helpful if we would have that in writing. Lord Grant, any further questions?
No, thank you very much.
Lord Macpherson, any further questions? Nick Smith?
Oh, thanks.
Mr. Simmonds, anything else you wish to put on the record?
I just wanted to reiterate one of the key findings of the Health, Safety and Fire report is the confirmation that because of the risks facing the palace, we need to do a programme of the scale of R&R and the urgency of a decision. And so we are really committed to sticking to the timetable that the clerks discussed.
Tight timetable, forgive me, and the urgency for a decision. Mr. Goldsmith, anything else for the record?
No, thank you.
Mr. Burton?
If I may just emphasise something that Tom said when we talked about value for money so far, it's the consistent finding that the budgets have been and the expenditure has been taut and realistic. That I think is an assurance to us both.
Reflecting the language in the Treasury letter.
Treasury, correct.
Marvellous.
Thank you.
Mr. MacMillan?
No, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. The Estimates Commission will now deliberate in private. The meeting has now concluded. Order, order.